Prologue. Long ago the gods of this land gave the elements and weapons to four people. They gave fire to Cyrus, solar heir to the throne, with a burning katana, water to Kailani, heavenly sea, with an aqua staff, heir to Salus, primordial god of the sky, with a longbow and earth to Terra, earth, with Araxidium daggers. So over many years they made their own kingdoms. The fire kingdom Adhemare, little fire, was made around a volcano. The water kingdom Heraclean, underwater city, was made in the ocean. The air kingdom Draft was made on the clouds, and the earth kingdom Ixtal was made deep underground. Though they lived in peace for decades, Cyrus became greedy. He started taking over territories of the other kingdoms. Only Terra was brave enough to challenge him. So Terra went and fought him at the top of Adhemare. "Why are you doing this?" said Terra. "The people will be better off with one leader of me. After I'm done with you, I will force the other kingdoms to give me their power. So the people have one true king of kings to rule over them," stated Cyrus. So the demigods battled it out for a while. "Just give up already," screamed Cyrus. The swords and daggers swung by. Cyrus was beating Terra down until she used her teleporters. Then she was stabbing, slashing, and getting the upper hand. After a little bit, Cyrus realized it was a pattern, so he started fighting back. So Terra was getting destroyed again. As a final chance to beat Cyrus, Terra summoned hundreds of teleporters. To defend from that, Cyrus made a fiery explosion to protect him and to destroy the teleporters. After the explosion, Terra got blasted into a rock wall, and Cyrus walked over in victory. "You're the strongest demigod, except for me. You put up a good fight, but it's time to shatter your spine. Crack, now you are mine." Chapter 1. No risk, no reward. "I just have to get to the dagger," said Yumiko, child of the sea, to himself in his head. Yumiko was sprinting down the halls of Adhemare. When he gets to the end of the hall, he sneaks into the king's armory and extinguishes the safe holding Terra's Araxidium daggers. As soon as gets the daggers, the alarms go off, but it's too late. He's off sprinting down the halls to Terra's prison. Yumiko uses water to form a key and gets in. To resurrect Terra, he has to absorb some of the power from her daggers. So when she is getting resurrected, Yumiko has to defend her body from the Führerkrieger of Adhemare. So he started to fight off the Führerkrieger. So they charged at him. So he started to fight. He swung his staff at one of them, and it hit his head with a crack. It shattered his skull, and the Führerkrieger bled from every hole in his head. Then the next one rushed Yumiko. He was caught off guard, so the Führerkrieger sliced his arm clean off. Then as a reaction, Yumiko pierced his heart with the staff, and it got tinted red with blood. Then Yumiko screams in pain. He starts to get overrun by the Führerkriegers. He starts to panic and just starts swinging his staff around to defend him. Then out of nowhere, rocks and vines start grabbing the Führerkrieger and pulling them back. Then a bright green dagger sliced through 3 of the Führerkrieger. With 2 Führerkrieger left, Terra used her vines to enter the Führerkrieger veins and absorb all the blood. Then Terra used her vines to sew back Yumiko's arm back. After Terra sewed back Yumiko's arm, they heard heavy footsteps coming down the hall, first walking then sprinting. Chapter 2. First fight back. When he finally gets into view, Yumiko does not know who he is, but Terra knows it's Cyrus's second-in-command. "Who's that?" said Yumiko. "Logi, Cyrus's second-in-command. Cyrus gave him some of his power, so this is going to be a fight," said Terra. "So we meet again, Terra. It's been a while since I last saw you dying. Today will happen again," said Logi. "So, let's get this over with," said Terra. Terra dashed over to Logi and cut his hand off. Then Terra got smashed back into a wall. Logi lunged at Yumiko. Yumiko tried to dodge him, but he was too slow and Logi cut his leg off. Then Logi kicked him in the gut. He coughed up blood and got kicked into a wall. When Logi was distracted, Terra charged at Logi, but he knew and backhanded her. After he backhanded behind him, he heard rocks crumbling down. He realized he messed up Then he felt a sharp pain in his skull. Terra used rocks to make a statue, so the one Logi smacked was a rock. When Logi hit the statue, Terra went behind him. Then he fell down with a jab in his head. "That is it, Yumiko! Yumiko! Yumiko!" screamed Terra. Yumiko passed out from blood loss. Terra started to sew back his leg with vines and encase it in stone, but he already lost so much blood from his injuries. Terra then remembered that she absorbed blood from the Furkrieger, so she pierced his skin on his wrists and started giving him the blood. When she was giving him blood, Terra picked up Yumiko and started walking to Ixtal. Chapter 3, Back Home. When they got to Ixtal, Terra put Yumiko in one of their hospitals, and he started to get healed. Ixtal is the main distributor of medicine. Then Terra had to rest, but also take care of things in the kingdom. After a few days, Yumiko could walk again, and he went to find Terra. When he found her, she was having a meeting with her second-in-command, who led when she was gone in her court. "Terra, when you were gone, we kept a steady economy with Heraclean, but in the time you were gone, Salus allied with Cyrus," stated Regina. "Thank you, Regina. What has happened with Cyrus?" said Terra. "He started to expand his kingdom," said Regina. "Okay," stated Terra. Then she sees Yumiko and walks over to talk to him. "How was your sleep?" laughed Terra. "First, I slept well. Second, what happened? Third, how long was I out? Fourth, and what are we going to do now?" said Yumiko. "That's good you slept well. Second, you passed out from blood loss from your arm and leg, and the doctors and I gave you some blood, and sewed your arm and leg back also with a cast on both. Third, you were out for 5.5 days. Lastly, we are going to train and practice both of our abilities and fighting skills," explained Terra. Then when they are talking, one of Terra's messengers, the youngest one, then tells them something important. "Queen, a new being has been spotted. Usually only at battlefields or mass death events, always spotted after it," stated the royal messenger. "Does the being have a name?" questioned Terra. "He doesn't have a real name, but he always engraved into some of the bodies." The lead interpreter said he thought it was Old Eldarian, but he was not sure because no one has written in it for over 4,000 years. Stated the royal messenger. "Anything else?" asked Terra. "The words he told us before he turned into dust was," said the royal messenger. "Okay, we will figure it out," said Terra. Then the messenger runs off. "When we practice, we will figure it out," said Terra. "Okay," said Yumiko. They keep talking when they walk to the battle practice center. Chapter 4, Training Day. When they got to the center, Yumiko started to practice on a rock training doll. He is practicing how to use his staff in combination with water. Terra was practicing with her Jord with her vines, clones, and daggers. The main thing she needs to practice with is her teleporters. "Before I was taken, I sent my teleporters to my main lab to be upgraded. I'm supposed to be getting an arm brace that can move the teleports, make them flash bangs, and smoke grenades. So I am going to see if it's ready," said Terra. Then she goes to her lab to see if it's ready. And it is ready. She takes it and goes back to practice with it. She starts to make combos with her dagger, teleports, and smokes. Yumiko, when he's taking a break from training, he thinks about what the messenger said. "I'm pretty sure there is a secret library in Heraclean's capital with the oldest text ever," stated Yumiko. "Then if it's real, let's go," said Terra. When they start on their mission, they realize they can use the mining tunnels to get there quicker, so they use the tunnels. Chapter 5, Heraclean. When they got to Heraclean, they were met by the Nereos, the royal army of the sea. Terra and Yumiko said they were here to talk with the Queen Kailani. "I didn't think your plan would work, Yumiko, but it did." "Good to see you again, Terra," said Kailani. "I had to try something if you wouldn't, and look now we have a chance to beat Cyrus," stated Yumiko angrily. "Good to see you too, Kailani," said Terra. "I see you met my son, Yumiko," exclaimed Kailani. "I did not know he was your son," questioned Terra. "Yeah, he was getting frustrated because I was doing nothing to get you, so he made a plan to break you out," stated Kailani. It worked very well, and only cost an arm and a leg, said Terra. I see. And what did you come here for? Asked Kailani. Yumiko says there is a secret library that holds the oldest dialect in the world. Explained Terra. Come with me quickly, said Kailani. Then they followed her into the kingdom's main castle, then to the repair quest room. Kailani pulled a chandelier down, and it lifted the bed to see a staircase down to a secret room below the kingdom. When they got to the bottom, there was an old rusty door. When they pushed it open, everything went dark. Chapter 6. Al-Karawayan Library. When they opened the door, the pressure from inside the chamber blew out and blew out the fire of the torches. Then they got a spark stone and lit the torches again, and as they walked in the library, they lit all the lights so they could see. Try to find the old Eldarian section, said Terra. Then they split up to explore and find it. I found an Eldarian book. It's called Deathbringer, and I found a translator, yelled Yumiko. They all went over to Yumiko to see the book. It reads reading. In the medieval era, there was an called, named after the god of death. On one of his missions, it was 2 people he had to kill. He killed the one, but the other one got the upper hand and beat him down on the ground. He landed on a black shard. As a last resort, he grabbed it and stabbed the man. The deads dripped down the shard, and Thanatos felt something powerful. He found a shard of the heart of Balder. After 30 years of getting more and more advanced weapons from the shard made weapons out of dark blood from the dead. The kingdom started to him head-on, but he killed them all. After almost all the kingdoms have fallen, he moves to Midgard to make peace and chooses who dies. Done reading. Explained Yumiko. So Thanatos was a human once, and he lives in Midgard, said Terra. And it also says reading. He guards pure Araxidium stone. He kept his favorite weapons, a 2-bladed double-barrel shotgun, and used the rest of the blood to make a castle, explained Yumiko. I guess we're going to Midgard, said Terra. Chapter 7. Midgard. Because the mining tunnels don't go under Midgard, we have to walk to Midgard, explained Terra. They start walking to Midgard. It takes them 3 days to make it there. Then in the distance, they see a dark red castle. That must be it, said Yumiko. Then they start to walk over, but being careful. And when they get there, a man walks out of the castle. Are you here to kill me? Asked Thanatos. No, we just need help killing someone, said Terra. Who? Asked Thanatos. Cyrus, the king of Adamare, explained Terra. Wake up to reality. Nothing ever goes as planned in this accursed world. The longer you live, the more you will realize that the only things that truly exist in this reality are merely pain, suffering, and futility, explained Thanatos. Please just try to kill him. What do you want in return? And if you don't help us, will you at least give us things to get stronger? Pleaded Yumiko. Fine. I will try to kill him if he comes here, and I want death. Also, if you cut one of my limbs, it will make something to upgrade your weapon, explained Thanatos. Thank you. And what type of upgrade? Asked Terra. If you are able to cut one of my limbs, dark blood would reform it, and it would form into something that would help your weapon, and it changes for everyone, so I can't tell you what you will get, explained Thanatos. Okay then, let's do this, said Terra with a smirk. Chapter 8. Death's Duel. Then out of nowhere, Thanatos rushed at Terra, and he shot twice at her. She made a stone wall to protect herself, but some bullets already hit her, and the bullets did hurt as much as they burned their way through her. Then he stabbed the wall, and his blades went right through the wall, almost cutting her. She jumped back when he broke her wall. Then she threw her teleporters around the room and teleported away. Then she covers herself in vines and makes vine clones to try to trick him. Then, when he charges her, all the clones teleport to different parts of the room. After they teleport, they charge at him, and he starts shooting at the clones, but every time they teleport somewhere else. So Thanatos makes blood needles and throws them at the teleporters after he shot at them, so they all got stabbed. So he lunged at the one that did not fall, and it was the real one. He pinned her down when he was about to shoot. A bladed rock fell and cut off his arm, so she won. So then he took his arm and stabbed the blade into it, and the arm morphed into a handle and a guard for the blade. "Thank you," said Terra. "Now, go, he is here," exclaimed Thanatos. "Oh, I will stay and help," explained Terra. "No, I will take care of it," stated Thanatos. Chapter 9. The King's Arrival. The air grew heavy with the scent of molten stone as Cyrus approached the castle. His steps reverberated across the cracked earth, each one sending a shudder through the land. Flames danced ominously around his katana, casting eerie shadows across the crimson fortress. Inside, Terra hesitated, glancing at Thanatos. His expression was impassive, but his tone carried finality. "Leave now, or you'll never have the chance." "I'll keep him occupied." Reluctantly, Terra grabbed Yumiko, who was struggling to stand. "We can't waste this opportunity," she said, dragging him toward the castle's rear exit. As they slipped out, Thanatos stepped into the courtyard to face Cyrus. "So, you're the one causing all this trouble," Cyrus sneered, his katana blazing with a radiant heat. "I'll admit, I expected more of a fight from these so-called demigods. But you're different." Thanatos said nothing. Instead, he raised his double-bladed shotgun, the edges glistening with freshly formed dark blood. Without warning, Cyrus lunged, his katana slicing through the air. Thanatos sidestepped effortlessly and fired. The blast hit Cyrus's shoulder, sending him skidding back, but the flames around him only grew hotter, burning away his wound almost instantly. "You've got spirit," Cyrus growled, twirling his katana. "But let's see how long you last against the Sun King." The ground trembled beneath their clash. Thanatos' weapons roared as blood-forged projectiles met Cyrus's fiery blade. Sparks and flames erupted in every direction, lighting the sky like a second dawn. Each swing of Cyrus's katana sent waves of blistering heat, while Thanatos countered with relentless precision, his dark weapons leaving trails of shadow in the air. Meanwhile, Terra and Yumiko reached a vantage point just beyond the castle. From there, they could see the battle unfolding. "We can't leave him alone," Yumiko said, gripping his staff despite his injuries. "No, we're not strong enough yet," Terra said firmly. "But we'll honor his sacrifice by preparing ourselves." She activated her teleporter and opened a gateway leading back to Ixtal. "We'll train. We'll grow stronger. And when the time comes, we'll finish what he started." Back in the courtyard, Thanatos and Cyrus's duel reached its peak. Thanatos moved with supernatural speed, dodging and countering every blow. But Cyrus's power was unrelenting. With a mighty roar, Cyrus unleashed an explosion of fire, engulfing the entire courtyard in flames. When the smoke cleared, Thanatos stood, his form charred but unyielding. "You'll have to do better than that," he said, his voice steady. Cyrus smirked. "Then I will." The volcano beneath Adamir rumbled as Cyrus called forth its power. Lava spewed into the air, raining molten destruction around them. Thanatos braced himself, his weapon shifting and reforming in his hands, growing more sinister with each passing moment. This wasn't just a battle. It was a clash of two unstoppable forces, a confrontation that would decide the fate of the elemental kingdoms. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the battlefield, a figure watched silently. His presence was like a whisper of death, his form barely visible. The engraving of ancient Eldarian symbols glowed faintly on his armor as he observed the chaos below. The Deathbringer had awakened. Chapter 10. Whispers of the Deathbringer. The figure in the shadows moved closer to the battlefield, his steps soundless despite the chaos. As Thanatos and Cyrus clashed, neither noticed the eerie calm that accompanied the Deathbringer's presence. His form shimmered, a translucent amalgamation of old Eldarian magic and pure malice. Cyrus's fiery katana struck the ground, sending a shockwave of molten rock toward Thanatos. The Deathbringer raised a hand, and the magma solidified midair, freezing into jagged obsidian shards. Both warriors turned toward the new arrival. "Who dares interfere in my battle?" Cyrus bellowed, his voice laced with rage. The Deathbringer spoke, his voice a haunting echo. Your ambitions disrupt the balance of life and death, Sun King. The gods granted you power, but not to rule over all. Thanatos narrowed his eyes. And you? Why reveal yourself now? The Deathbringer stepped forward, his translucent form becoming solid. Because the scales tipped too far toward chaos. I am here to correct them. Chapter 11. The Price of Power. Cyrus sneered, raising his katana. I don't care who you are. You will burn just like the others. With a flick of his wrist, a pillar of fire erupted beneath the Deathbringer. Yet when the flames subsided, the figure remained untouched, surrounded by a protective aura of dark energy. Foolish, the Deathbringer said, his tone devoid of emotion. With a wave of his hand, black tendrils of energy shot out, wrapping around Cyrus. The Sun King struggled, his flames growing hotter and brighter, but the tendrils absorbed the energy, feeding on his power. Thanatos watched silently, torn between seizing the opportunity to strike and staying out of the Deathbringer's way. Finally, he spoke. What do you want, Spirit? To bring balance, the Deathbringer replied. And to ensure no one can disrupt it again, he turned toward Thanatos. You, too, have strayed from your path. The shard you wield carries a darkness that consumes all. Thanatos tightened his grip on his weapon. The shard gives me the power to fight. It gives you power, the Deathbringer agreed, but at a cost. Are you willing to pay it? Chapter 12. Terra's Gambit. Far from the battlefield, Terra and Yumiko had returned to Ixtal, where preparations for war were underway. The underground city buzzed with activity as warriors trained, craftsmen forged weapons, and healers stocked supplies. Terra paced in her war chamber, her mind racing. The encounter with Thanatos and the revelations about the Deathbringer weighed heavily on her. We need more allies, she said, turning to Yumiko. If Cyrus is this strong, even with Thanatos, we'll need every kingdom united. Then we'll need to convince Salus, Yumiko said, wincing as he adjusted his bandaged leg. Even if he's allied with Cyrus, he might have doubts. Terra nodded. It's a risk, but it's one we'll have to take. Chapter 13. A Skybound Alliance. The journey to draft the Kingdom of Air was treacherous. Terra and Yumiko rode on beasts native to Ixtal, climbing high into the clouds. When they reached the floating city, they were greeted by armed sentinels. We request an audience with Salus, Terra said firmly. The sentinels hesitated, but eventually escorted them to the grand spire at the heart of the city. Inside, they found Salus seated on a throne made of wind-sculpted crystal. His longbow rested at his side, and his piercing gaze met Terra's. So, the Earth Queen returns, Salus said, his voice cold. What brings you here? We need your help to stop Cyrus, Terra said. His conquest won't stop with the other kingdoms. He'll come for draft, too. Salus laughed bitterly. Do you think I don't know that? But you underestimate his power. He has promised me safety if I remain loyal. And do you believe him? Yumiko asked. Cyrus doesn't spare anyone. He'll take your power just like he did Terra's. Salus's expression darkened. He leaned forward. What do you propose? A united front? Terra said. With Ixtal, Heraclean, and Draft together, we stand a chance. And there's someone else who may help. Chapter 14. Rising Darkness. Back at the Crimson Castle, the battle raged on. Cyrus had broken free of the Deathbringer's tendrils. His flames now mingled with molten rock. Thanatos, battered but unrelenting, continued his assault, his dark weapon shifting forms to match his strategy. The Deathbringer remained on the periphery, watching with cold detachment. But his presence seemed to agitate Cyrus, who unleashed a torrent of fire toward him. This time, the Deathbringer retaliated, raising a hand to summon a barrier of spectral energy. The clash created a shockwave that shook the earth. You can't win, the Deathbringer said, stepping closer. Your greed blinds you. Cyrus roared, his katana blazing brighter than ever. I will show you what true power looks like. As the ground beneath them cracked and the sky darkened, it became clear. This battle was only the beginning of a larger war. Chapter 15. The Veil Lifts. In the floating city of Draft, Saela sat motionless as Terra's words hung in the air. The weight of his silence made Yumiko shift uncomfortably, but Terra held her ground, studying the Sky King's face for any hint of agreement or betrayal. Finally, Saela smiled, a sharp, chilling expression. You've come all this way to unite the kingdoms, yet you misunderstood the true nature of this conflict. Terra's heart sank. Something about his tone made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. What do you mean? Saelis rose from his throne, his crystalline staff glowing faintly in the dim light. Cyrus is but a pawn, a storm unleashed by my will. Do you think the Sun King would ever have the vision to carry out such a grand plan on his own? No. His fire burns because I lit it. The air seemed to thicken, and Terra instinctively took a step back. You're behind this? Of course, Saela said, his voice as light and cutting as a razor wind. Do you think I would leave the fate of the world to squabbling fools like Cyrus or the remnants of Ixtal? No, Terra. The old order must fall, and from its ashes I will build something greater. Yumiko reached for his blade, but with a flick of Saelis's hand, a gust of wind knocked him to his knees. Don't be hasty, Saelis warned, his tone mocking. You wouldn't want to lose another limb, would you? Terra, clench your fists. You think you're a god, Saelis, but all I see is a coward hiding behind Cyrus's fire. Saelis laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth. Believe what you will. Soon, you'll see that resistance is futile. Chapter 16. Seeds of Defiance. Back in Ixtal, Terra gathered her remaining allies, her mind racing with the revelation of Saelis's betrayal. The council chamber was filled with grim faces as she explained the truth. Cyrus isn't the real threat, Terra said. He's powerful, but he's just a weapon. Saelis is the one pulling the strings. One of the elders shook their head. Then we're doomed. Saelis commands the skies. His power rivals that of the gods. Terra's eyes flashed with determination. Then we'll find a way to bring him down. The gods are not invincible, and neither is he. Yumiko leaned on his crutch, his voice steady despite the pain. We'll need to sow doubt in Cyrus's mind. If he learns he's being used, he might turn on Saelis. Agreed, Terra said, and we'll need allies. The Deathbringer may despise us, but he values balance. If we can convince him that Saelis threatens the entire world, he might join us. Chapter 17. The Broken Pawn. In the heart of the Crimson Castle, Cyrus stood atop his throne, surveying the land he had conquered. His flames burned dimly, a reflection of his growing unease. The words of the Deathbringer echoed in his mind. Your greed blinds you. A shadow stirred in the corner of the room. Doubt doesn't suit you, Sun King, came a voice as cold as frost. Cyrus turned sharply, his katana blazing to life. Who dares? The figure stepped into the light. Saelis. It is only I, your ally. Cyrus relaxed slightly, but kept his weapon drawn. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be tending to your floating kingdom? Saelis smirked. I came to remind you of our shared purpose. Do not let whispers of doubt cloud your judgment. Cyrus frowned. What purpose? Conquering the world for you to sit atop it. Saelis's expression hardened. Careful, Cyrus. Without my guidance, you are nothing more than a stray ember, destined to burn out. The Sun King growled, his flames flaring. I don't need your guidance, Sky King. I brought kingdoms to their knees. Saelis chuckled softly, his voice filled with condescension. Yes, but who gave you the means? Who gave you the shard that amplifies your flames? Cyrus froze, his grip tightening on his weapon. You... Yes, Saelis said, stepping closer. And I can take it away just as easily. For a moment, The room was silent except for the crackle of Cyrus's flames. Finally, the Sun King lowered his weapon, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" "Your loyalty," Sailor said, his tone sweet yet laced with menace. "And your flames until the very end." Chapter 18, Stormbreak. The skies over Draft grew dark as Salus prepared his final move. In the Grand Spire, he summoned his most trusted warriors, each adorned with armor forged from the winds themselves. His voice boomed across the city. "The time has come to reshape the world. The ground will tremble, the seas will boil, and the skies will reign supreme." But as his forces prepared for war, Terra and her allies infiltrated the city. Using ancient Ixtali magic, they masked their presence, slipping through the city's defenses. Their target was the spire, where Salus's power was concentrated. Yumiko paused, glancing at Terra. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," she said firmly. "It can't." As they climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the sound of chanting filled the halls. At the top, they found Salus standing before a massive storm vortex, his staff raised high. "So, you've come to die," Salus said, not turning to face them. "No," Terra said, stepping forward. "We've come to end this." Chapter 19, Winds of Despair. The battle was chaos. Salus summoned tornadoes and razor-sharp winds, forcing Terra and her allies to fight just to stay on their feet. Yumiko hurled daggers infused with water magic, each one deflected effortlessly by Salus's barriers. "You cannot hope to defeat me," Salus said, his voice a storm itself. "I am the wind. I am the sky." But Terra stood firm, her earth magic anchoring her to the ground. "And I am the earth, the foundation of all things." She slammed her fist into the ground, sending shockwaves through the spire. The structure trembled, cracks spreading across its surface. Salus sneered. "Foolish girl, destroying this city won't save you." "No," Terra said, her eyes blazing with determination. "But it'll bring you down with it." As the spire began to collapse, a new figure appeared, the Deathbringer. His spectral form materialized amidst the chaos, his voice calm yet commanding. "This madness ends now." Chapter 20, The Stranger at the Gates. The aftermath of the battle between Terra and Salus left the spire in ruins, but no lives were lost, only battered bodies and shattered resolve. As the dust settled, Terra, Yumiko, and the remaining survivors limped away from the chaos, retreating to the safety of the outskirts. Meanwhile, far to the south, at the base of Cyrus's Crimson Fortress, a lone figure stirred. Erebus Yane lay sprawled in the shadow of the towering Blood Castle, his ragged clothing soaked with morning dew. He was a man of contradictions, his eyes sharp with intelligence but clouded with confusion, as if he had forgotten his purpose entirely. Where am I?" Erebus muttered, pushing himself to his knees. His voice carried a deep resonance, but the words trembled with uncertainty. A patrol of Fuhrkrieger soldiers passed by, their glowing red armor reflecting the crimson light of the fortress. One of them paused, peering down at Erebus with suspicion. "Another lost soul, I see. The Blood Castle has a way of drawing the Forsaken." Erebus looked up, squinting at the soldier. "Blood Castle? What is this place?" The soldier snorted. "Where the fires of conquest burn brightest. But if you don't know, then perhaps you shouldn't linger here." Erebus nodded, rising shakily to his feet. His dark hair fell over his eyes as he surveyed the fortress looming above him. There was something about its jagged spires that stirred a faint memory, but he couldn't grasp it. Without another word, he stumbled toward the gates, unaware of the events unfolding within. Chapter 21, The Corruption. Back at the ruins of Draft, Terra gathered her injured allies. The city lay in shambles, but Salus had retreated to his floating citadel, taking the full brunt of their resistance with him. For the moment, they had respite. Yumiko sat apart from the group, gripping his injured arm tightly. His breathing was shallow, and a faint red glow pulsed from a gash near his wrist. "Yumiko?" Terra approached cautiously, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," he said, wincing as he tried to hide his hand. It's the blood. When I struck one of the Führerkrieger, his blood got on me. I didn't think much of it, but now..." The veins around the wound had turned dark, spidering up his arm like creeping vines. Terra's heart sank. Führerkrieger blood. It's not natural. It's infused with Cyrus's fire, corrupted by his magic. Yumiko tried to rise, but his legs buckled beneath him. Regina, Terra's second-in-command, rushed to his side. "You're not fine," Regina said, her voice sharp but laced with worry. "You're burning from the inside out." Vulcana, Terra's third-in-command and a fiery-tempered warrior, knelt beside him. Her red-orange hair caught the dim light like a flicker of flame. "If it's magic, maybe we can draw it out." Terra nodded. "We'll try, but we need to act fast." Chapter 22, Eren, the Shadow of the Sky. In the floating citadel above, Salus seethed. His plans had been disrupted, but the war was far from over. At his side stood Eren, his second-in-command, a silent and menacing figure wielding a scythe as black as the storm clouds. The blade hummed faintly, a weapon attuned to the winds it controlled. "They've escaped," Eren said, his voice calm and measured. "But they've left behind a trail of weakness. Shall I hunt them?" Salus turned to his lieutenant, his face twisted in thought. "No, not yet. Let them fester in their false sense of victory. But prepare the tempest. When we strike next, there will be no survivors." Eren nodded, his side glowing faintly as he turned to leave. "As you command, Sky King." Chapter 23, Strange Allies. Erebus Yane wandered deeper into the Blood Castle's shadow, where he encountered a surprising sight. The Deathbringer. The spectral figure hovered silently, his presence oppressive yet oddly calming. "You," Erebus said, narrowing his eyes. "What are you?" The Deathbringer's hollow voice echoed in Erebus's mind. "I am Balance. And you, Erebus Yane, are the unknown." "Unknown?" Erebus frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," the Deathbringer replied. "The fate of this world hinges on your choice. But for now, tread carefully. The flames of Cyrus burn hotter than you realize." Before Erebus could respond, the Deathbringer vanished, leaving him alone once more. But the cryptic words lingered in his mind, urging him forward. Chapter 24, Bonds Tested. As Terra and her team worked to heal Yumiko, the corruption grew stronger. His normally steady gaze faltered, replaced by flashes of anger and despair. Vulcana struggled to contain him as he thrashed in pain. "We're losing him," Regina shouted, her voice tinged with panic. Terra gritted her teeth, placing her hands on Yumiko's chest. Her earth magic pulsed outward, attempting to ground the chaotic energy coursing through him. "Hold on, Yumiko. Don't let it take you." But Yumiko's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with an unnatural red. "It's too late," he growled, his voice layered with something darker. "I can feel it taking over." Vulcana slammed her fist into the ground, her own fire flaring in frustration. "We can't let this happen." Regina glanced at Terra. "There's only one option. We have to isolate him until we can find a cure." Terra hesitated but nodded. "Do it. We'll save him, no matter what it takes." Chapter 25, A Gathering Storm. In the skies above, Eren stood at the helm of the storm fleet, his scythe raised high. The winds obeyed his every command, swirling in chaotic patterns that mirrored his master's will. "Let them prepare," Eren muttered, his voice barely audible over the howling gale. "Their resistance will crumble like sand before the storm." In the distance, Salus watched, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Soon, this world will bow to the skies, and those who stand against us will be nothing more than whispers in the wind." Chapter 26, Erebus's Choice. Erebus reached the gates of the Blood Castle, where he was confronted by a squad of Feuerkrieger. Their leader stepped forward, his fiery blade drawn. "State your purpose, stranger." Erebus hesitated, his mind racing. Something deep within him stirred, a faint echo of power long forgotten. Without thinking, he raised his hand, and a shadowy mist began to form around him. "My purpose," Erebus said, his voice steady, "to uncover the truth." The Feuerkrieger hesitated, sensing something unusual about the man before them. But before they could act, Erebus unleashed a wave of dark energy, scattering the squad like leaves in the wind. As he stepped through the gates, his path became clear. He was not here to serve the flames, but to extinguish them. The threads of fate weave tighter as allies and enemies converge. With Erebus entering the fray, Eren preparing the skies, and Yumiko's corruption deepening, the battle for the world's future grows ever more uncertain. Chapter 27. Flames of Fury. Deep within the Blood Castle, Cyrus brooded on his throne, his fiery eyes scanning the room. Standing at his side was his trusted second-in-command, Logi, a figure wreathed in crimson flames. Logi's molten armor glowed with an intensity that seemed almost alive, and her double-edged greatsword, Inferno's Wrath, dripped with embers that never extinguished. "My lord," Logi began, her voice a rumble. "The war begins to escalate. The remnants of Terra's forces grow restless, and Salus's ambitions cannot be ignored." Cyrus leaned forward, his molten form flickering with restrained power. "Let them come. The flames of conquest will consume them all. But I sense something else, a disturbance near our gates." Logi bowed her head. "A lone figure has entered the castle grounds. He wields a strange power, one that even my flames could not entirely suppress." Cyrus's gaze sharpened. "Bring him to me. If he is a threat, he will burn. If he can be molded, he may yet serve." Chapter 28. The Test of Erebus. Erebus Yane wandered through the darkened halls of the Blood Castle, the oppressive heat and flickering flames unnerving but not unbearable. Shadows danced around him as if alive, whispering in a language he could not understand. Before he could proceed further, the air shifted, and the temperature surged. Logi emerged from a corridor, her fiery form lighting the path like a torch in the abyss. "You've intruded where few dared tread," Logi said, her voice echoing ominously. "State your purpose, stranger, or be reduced to ash." Erebus clenched his fists, feeling a surge of defiance. "I don't know why I'm here, but I feel drawn, as if this place holds answers I've been searching for." Logi smirked, raising his greatsword. "Then prove yourself or perish." The ensuing clash was both brutal and mesmerizing. Erebus's shadows danced against Logi's flames, the two elements colliding in a spectacle of dark and light. Despite his uncertainty, Erebus discovered an innate control over the shadowy mist that surrounded him, using it to counter Logi's relentless strikes. Finally, Logi paused, lowering her blade. "Interesting. You are no ordinary intruder. Perhaps the Master will find use for you after all." Reluctantly, Erebus followed Logi deeper into the castle, his resolve hardening with each step. Chapter 29. Winds of Vengeance. In the skies above Terra's camp, Eren hovered silently, his sides spinning in slow arcs. The winds he commanded were like an extension of himself, carrying whispers of their enemies' movements. Below, a fleet of floating warships bristled with weaponry, each vessel poised to strike at Salus's command. Eren's focus was broken by the arrival of Regina and Volcana, Terra's second and third in command. The sisters stood at the cliff's edge, observing the distant fleet. "They're watching us," Regina muttered, her keen eyes scanning the horizon. Eren's side was like a beacon in the storm. Volcana cracked her knuckles, flames sparking around her fists. "Let them watch. We're not hiding." Terra joined them, her expression grim. "We can't afford to let Salus strike first. We'll need to split our forces." Regina, Volcana, You'll lead a diversionary strike while I confront Salus directly. Regina hesitated. And what of Yumiko? He's still. We'll handle that too, Terra interrupted, her voice firm. I'll find a way to save him. Chapter 30. The corruption spreads. Yumiko sat in the center of the camp, his corrupted veins now extending across his chest and neck. Despite their best efforts, the corruption resisted all attempts to purge it. Regina knelt beside him, her lightning-infused spear resting at her side. How do you feel? Like I'm being torn apart, Yumiko muttered, his voice strained. But I can still fight. Don't count me out. Terra approached, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We won't give up on you, but we can't let the corruption spread unchecked. For now, you stay here and rest. As the group prepared for their next move, a faint voice echoed in the distance. It was soft, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. Help me! Everyone turned to see a hooded figure stumbling toward them. Erebus Yane, battered but alive, collapsed at their feet. Terra's eyes narrowed as she helped him up. Who are you? She demanded. Erebus looked up, his gaze weary but determined. Someone who might be able to help. Chapter 31. Gathering the Elements. As Erebus explained his encounter with Logi and the mysteries of the Blood Castle, Terra realized his arrival was no coincidence. The shadowy power he wielded might be the key to countering Cyrus's fiery corruption. We need to act quickly, Erebus said. Cyrus is planning something big, and his second-in-command, Logi, won't rest until he's conquered everything in his path. Terra nodded, formulating a plan. Regina Vulcana, take your squads and engage Salus's forces in the skies. Erebus, you're with me. We're going to the Blood Castle. What about Yumiko? Regina asked. Terra hesitated but turned to Yumiko. You'll stay behind. If the corruption worsens, retreat to safety. No, Yumiko said, standing with visible effort. I'm not sitting this one out. Terra's gaze softened. All right, but promise me you'll be careful. As the group prepared to move out, Aaron watched from the skies, his side humming faintly. The storm was brewing, and the time for reckoning was near. Chapter 32. Flames and Shadows Collide. In the heart of the Blood Castle, Cyrus waited, his fiery throne pulsing with energy. Logi entered the chamber, kneeling before his master. The intruder is coming, Logi said, and he brings allies. Cyrus smiled, a malevolent grin that sent a wave of heat through the room. Good. Let them come. They will find only fire and ash. As Terra and her team approached the castle gates, the tension was palpable. Erebus felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him, but he pushed forward, determined to uncover the truth. Inside, Cyrus rose from his throne, his flames roaring to life. Welcome, rebels, he boomed. Let us see if you can withstand the inferno. Chapter 33. Winds of Betrayal. The storm raged across the skies as Aaron observed the battlefield. His side hummed with power, the winds responding to his every whim. Salus floated beside him, arms crossed, his expression stoic. Aaron, Salus began, his voice calm but firm. The time has come. Strike the heart of Terra's forces. Leave no survivors. Aaron hesitated, his gaze fixed on the chaos below. Terra and her commanders fight with conviction. To crush them would be to extinguish a flame too pure. Salus turned to him, his expression darkening. You question my orders. Aaron gripped his side tightly. I follow your will, Lord Salus. But this war, its purpose, has begun to blur. Before Salus could respond, a lightning bolt crackled through the air, striking perilously close. Regina, Terra's second-in-command, appeared, her spear glowing with electric fury. So, you're the storm wielder, Regina said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Let's see if you can match my lightning. Chapter 34. Clash of Elements. The battle between Aaron and Regina lit up the sky. Lightning and wind collided in a dazzling display, their clash threatening to tear the heavens apart. Below, Volcano led the ground forces in a fierce assault against Saelus's fleet, her flames melting the metallic constructs that stood in their path. Terra stood at the forefront, her gaze unwavering. Erebus was beside her, his shadowy tendrils weaving a protective barrier against the onslaught. "What do you make of this place?" Terra asked Erebus as they neared the Blood Castle. Erebus's voice was laced with unease. "It feels alive, as if the castle itself watches our every move." Suddenly, the gates of the Blood Castle groaned open, and Logi emerged, flames spiraling around him. His molten armor glowed brighter than ever, and his sword was alight with a fire that seemed insatiable. "You've come far," Logi said, his voice like rolling thunder. "But this is where your journey ends." Erebus stepped forward, his shadows flickering. "We'll see about that." Chapter 35. Corruption Unleashed. Back at Terra's camp, Yumiko's condition worsened. The veins of corruption now pulsed with a fiery glow, his body shaking as he struggled to contain the spreading infection. "Stay back," Yumiko shouted as the medics tried to approach. "I can't control it." The blood of the Führerkrieger coursed through his veins, and with it came an overwhelming power and a voice. "Embrace the fire," it whispered. "Burn away your weakness." Yumiko clutched his head, fighting the seductive pull. Suddenly, flames erupted around him, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural crimson light. The surrounding soldiers stepped back in fear. "Commander," one shouted, "what's happening to him?" Before they could act, Yumiko collapsed, unconscious but alive. The corruption receded slightly, leaving his body in a precarious state. "We need to get him out of here," a soldier said. "If he turns, we're all doomed." Chapter 36. The Shadows Gamble. Inside the Blood Castle, Terra and Erebus faced Logi. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with ash. Terra's earth-shattering strikes clashed against Logi's fiery defenses, while Erebus's shadows darted in and out, searching for an opening. "You fight well," Logi said, her voice laced with grudging respect. "But fire consumes all. You cannot win." Terra narrowed her eyes. "Fire might consume, but the earth endures." She drove her hammer into the ground, sending a wave of rock and debris hurtling toward Logi. The flames parted just enough for Erebus to slip through, his shadows wrapping around Logi's blade. "Enough!" Logi roared, releasing an explosion of flame that sent them both sprawling. Her advance on Erebus, who struggled to rise. "You're strong," Logi said, raising her blade for a final strike. But strength alone is not enough. Before he could strike, a surge of wind tore through the chamber, knocking Logi back. Aaron landed between them, his scythe at the ready. "Aaron," Terra said, surprised. "Why are you?" "I've seen enough," Aaron interrupted. "This war has no honor, no purpose. If Saelus cannot see that, then I will." Logi growled, her flames intensifying. "You dare betray your master?" Aaron's eyes hardened. "I serve no master but the wind." Chapter 37. The Rising Storm. The sudden appearance of Aaron shifted the tide. With his winds countering Logi's flames, Terra and Erebus found a renewed strength. Together, they drove Logi back, forcing him to retreat into the depths of the castle. "This isn't over," Logi spat, disappearing into the shadows. Aaron turned to Terra and Erebus. "We don't have much time. Saelus is preparing to unleash his full power." Erebus stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Then let's end this." The trio moved deeper into the castle, the air growing heavier with each step. The whispers grew louder, and Erebus felt a strange familiarity with them, as if they called to him specifically. At the heart of the castle, they found Cyrus seated on his throne, his fiery aura lighting the chamber like a blazing sun. "You've come to die," Cyrus said, his voice dripping with malice. "How predictable." Terra raised her hammer. "We're here to end this, Cyrus." Cyrus rose, his flames roaring to life. Then let the world burn. Chapter 38. The Vessel of Shadows. Erebus staggered as they delved deeper into the Blood Castle, the whispers in his mind growing louder, more insistent. Every step seemed to pull him further into the shadows that clung to the walls like living things. Terra glanced at him, worry flickering across her face. "Erebus, are you all right?" she asked. He nodded weakly, but his voice betrayed his struggle. "Something is calling to me. It's not the castle. It's deeper." The group halted in a vast chamber, its walls etched with ancient, glowing runes. At the center stood a massive, obsidian monolith that pulsed with dark energy. Erebus's eyes widened as he stepped forward, the shadows from the monolith reaching out to him like tendrils. "Erebus, stop!" Aaron shouted, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped Erebus, lifting him into the air as his body convulsed. A voice boomed through the chamber, deep and resonant. "I am Nixaroth, god of darkness and demons. This vessel is mine." Erebus's body fell to the ground, motionless for a moment, before he slowly rose. His eyes glowed a deep violet, and his voice echoed with Nixaroth's power. "I see now. This war, this chaos. It is but a prelude to true dominion." Chapter 39. Flames and Tides. Back at the camp, Yumiko's corruption began to stabilize. The fiery veins coursing through his body merged with his natural water affinity, creating a strange equilibrium. He stood, flames and water swirling around him in harmony. "You're awake," a voice said. It was Kailani, the leader of the water faction, her long blue hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall. Behind her stood Kaido, her second in command, his trident shimmering with energy. "We've come to join the fight," Kailani said. "Cyrus's madness threatens us all, and if Terra leads this charge, then we will follow." Yumiko nodded, his newfound power radiating with confidence. "Then let's not waste any time." Chapter 40. Rage Unleashed. As Terra, Aaron, and the possessed Erebus approached the Blood Castle's throne room, they found themselves face to face with Cyrus. The fiery warlord stood in his full glory, flames dancing across his armor. "Ah!" The Earthshaker, the Windweaver, and the Shadowbound, Cyrus sneered. "You've come to witness the true power of fire." Before they could respond, Cyrus's body erupted with a fiery aura. His form grew larger, his armor morphing into jagged magma. His voice was a guttural roar. "This is my enraged form. You should feel honored to see it." Terra's body began to tremble, not with fear but with her own rising power. The ground beneath her feet cracked and shifted, her body encased in stone and emerald energy as her own enraged form emerged. "You're not the only one with rage," Terra growled, her voice deeper and more resonant. From behind, Aaron felt the wind surge around him. His side gleamed with a cyclone's fury as his body became one with the storm. And Erebus, now a vessel for Nixaroth, allowed the dark god to partially manifest, his form growing more monstrous with glowing runes etched into his skin. Chapter 41. The Tide Turns. As the battle raged in the throne room, Kailani and Kaido led the water faction into the castle. They encountered Logi in the lower halls, her molten armor searing the stone walls around him. "You dare enter here?" Logi growled, her blade igniting. Kailani stepped forward, her voice calm yet commanding. "The tide will wash away your flames." Water surged around her, forming a massive serpent that clashed with Logi's fire. Kaido joined the fray, his trident creating whirlpools that extinguished the flames. Despite Logi's power, the combined might of the water commanders proved overwhelming. "You won't stop Cyrus," Logi spat as she fell to her knees. Kailani raised her hand, and a wave crashed down on him, extinguishing his flames for good. Chapter 42. The Four Titans. In the throne room, the battle escalated as Cyrus's fire clashed with Terra's earth, Aaron's wind, and Nixaroth's darkness. The sheer intensity of their powers shook the castle to its foundation. Suddenly, the room grew colder as a new presence entered. Saelis descended, his silver armor glowing with ethereal energy. His enraged form radiated a divine aura, his wings shimmering like starlight. "This ends now," Saelis declared, his voice like a chorus of celestial voices. He raised his hand, and a beam of pure energy shot toward the combatants. Cyrus roared, blocking the attack with his flames. Terra and Aaron regrouped, their combined powers deflecting Saelis' assault. Nixaroth, through Erebus, laughed darkly. "You think you can control this chaos, Saelis? You are but a spark in the void." The four titanic forces clashed, their powers tearing through the castle. Kailani, Kaido, and Yumiko arrived just in time to see the spectacle. Yumiko stepped forward, his dual mastery of fire and water allowing him to act as a bridge between the warring elements. "Enough!" Yumiko shouted, unleashing a torrent of steam that momentarily disrupted the battle. All eyes turned to him, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Then Nixaroth spoke through Erebus, his voice dripping with malevolence. "This war is far from over. Choose your sides wisely, mortals, for the true reckoning is yet to come." Chapter 43, The Reckoning. The Blood Castle crumbled as the forces retreated, each faction regrouping. Erebus, now partially under Nixaroth's control, struggled to maintain his humanity. Terra and Aaron stood by him, their trust in him unshaken despite the looming threat of the Dark God. Meanwhile, Cyrus retreated to his volcanic fortress, his rage simmering but his resolve unbroken. Saelis, watching from above, began to plot his next move, his second-in-command Aaron now seen as a potential threat. In the days that followed, alliances began to form and shatter. Kailani and Kaido pledged their loyalty to Terra, seeing her as the best hope for balance. Yumiko, now a force of nature in his own right, trained relentlessly to master his newfound powers. But the whispers of Nixaroth lingered, and the shadows of chaos grew longer. Chapter 44, Unraveling Threads. The war had reached a boiling point. Battles raged across the land, alliances shifted like sand, and the ancient powers of the factions clashed with a violence that scarred the very earth beneath their feet. Terra, with the full support of Kailani, Kaido, and Yumiko, prepared for the final confrontation with the gods and their disciples. But Erebus, still struggling with the dark whispers of Nixaroth, began to unravel. His mind, a battlefield between his own will and the force inside him, began to crack. Nixaroth's voice boomed within, urging him to take power, to embrace the god of darkness fully. But Erebus resisted. His truth will be fighting the onslaught. One night, as the moon hung heavy in the sky, Erebus stood alone, his form flickering between shadow and substance. He looked up at the dark sky, his voice barely a whisper. "I am not your puppet, Nixaroth. I will fight for my freedom." The shadows twisted around him, trying to pull him back. For a moment, Erebus faltered, his body trembling. But a flash of light burst from his chest, pushing back the dark god's influence. It was Saelis, his ethereal form hovering in front of Erebus. "Stand strong." Saelis' voice was calm but full of power. "The path you walk now is your own. Do not let him claim you." Erebus looked up at Saelis, his eyes filled with gratitude, but also a flicker of doubt. Can I really resist him?" "You can," Saelis assured. "You have the will, and you have the power. It is not yet too late." Erebus took a deep breath, the darkness receding just enough for him to regain his focus. "Then I will fight alongside you." Chapter 45, Blood of the Gods. The armies of Terra and her allies finally gathered at the Blood Castle's gates, the ground beneath their feet soaked with centuries of bloodshed. Terra's form was now a towering figure of stone and emerald energy, her body glowing with power. Aaron stood beside her, his wind-swept form ready for battle. Kailani, Kaido, and Yumiko readied themselves, their mastery of water and fire a potent force. From the shadows, Erebus stood at the rear, his body flickering between light and darkness, Nyxaroth's influence still clawing at him. But he stood tall, unwavering. Behind them, the enemies they'd feared most appeared. Cyrus, cloaked in an aura of burning rage, stood at the head of the Fire faction's army. His form was monstrous, an embodiment of fury itself. Logi, his molten second-in-command, flanked him with a flame-reed sword. The third-in-command, Regina, hovered above them, wielding lightning in her hands, her eyes alight with wrath. Salus's eyes flickered as he saw the forces arrayed before them. The battle for the fate of the world had come. "We end this now," Terra declared, her voice as unyielding as the earth beneath her feet. Chapter 46. The Clash of Titans. The battle began with the force of a tidal wave. Cyrus unleashed torrents of fire, molten stone rising from the earth in deadly spires. Terra's stone form collided with his flames, the earth cracking and splitting under their clash. Aaron's scythe swung through the air, commanding the winds to carve a path through the firestorm, while Kailani and Kaido joined forces to create massive water walls to shield their allies. The ground shook as Erebus faced Regina, who summoned storms to clash with his dark powers. Lightning arced through the air, striking the earth as Erebus fought back with the void of Nyxaroth swirling around him. But it was Salus who drew the focus of the battlefield. His divine presence shone like a beacon in the chaos. He clashed directly with Cyrus, the fiery leader roaring in fury as their powers collided. Salus's divine energy met Cyrus's inferno head-on, the resulting explosion of light and flame sending shock waves through the battlefield. "Your fire is nothing compared to the stars," Salus declared, his voice booming with celestial authority. But Cyrus was relentless. "You underestimate the power of rage, Salus. It is the essence of destruction." Chapter 47. The Breaking Point. The fight raged on, and the tides of battle shifted back and forth. But something changed in the air. It wasn't just a clash of powers. It was the rise of something darker. As the battle reached its peak, the Blood Castle began to tremble. Erebus, struggling with the growing influence of Nyxaroth, felt the god's power surge through him like a flood. His body was racked with pain as he fought to retain control. "I cannot," Erebus whispered, his voice torn between the shadow and the light. Nyxaroth's voice roared within him. "Give in. Embrace your true power, Erebus. The world will burn, and you will be its king." Erebus faltered, but then he heard Salus's voice once more, cutting through the darkness. "Erebus, this is your fight. You do not belong to him." With all the strength he had left, Erebus threw himself forward, plunging his fist into the ground. The dark energy swirling around him shattered as a surge of light broke through. Nyxaroth howled in rage, but Erebus stood tall, now fully in control of his body. "I will not fall to you," Erebus declared, his voice filled with newfound strength. Chapter 48. The Final Stand. The battle reached its crescendo. Terra and Cyrus clashed again, the earth and fire waging war against one another in a cataclysmic storm. Kailani and Kaido locked in a fierce duel with Logi, their water powers pushing back the inferno of her molten form. Aaron and Regina clashed in a brutal dance of wind and lightning, neither willing to give an inch. And above them all, Salus and Erebus faced down the final threat, Nyxaroth. The dark god howled as his influence was pushed back, Erebus standing as his vessel, yet as his own master. Salus's divine light and Erebus's newfound power joined forces. Their combined might be shattering the dark god's presence. With a final roar, Nyxaroth was driven from the battlefield. His shadows dissipated like smoke in the wind. But the war was far from over. The land lay shattered, and the forces of chaos were still strong. The question remained: who would rise from the ashes to claim the world? Chapter 49. The Last Reckoning. As the dust settled, the victors stood amidst the ruin, their bodies bloodied and their resolve unbroken. Terra, her earth-shaken body standing tall, turned to face her allies. "We have won, but the cost has been great," she said quietly. "This war was only the beginning." Salus, his divine aura fading, nodded gravely. "Yes, the balance is fragile. We must rebuild." Erebus, free from Nyxaratha's grasp, looked at the sky. "The darkness still lingers, but I will fight for as long as I breathe." And so, the factions stood together, united in purpose, yet aware that the trials ahead were far from over. The bloodshed had ended, but a new dawn was yet to come. The world, torn by war, would need its champions more than ever. Would they rise to meet the coming storm, or would darkness swallow them whole? Only time would tell. Chapter 50. The Light's Resolve. The sky above the mountains where Salus dwelled was a storm of light and clouds, a barrier between the heavens and the fractured world below. Terra, Yumiko, and Kailani stood at the base of the ascent, their eyes fixed on the radiant summit. The path ahead was treacherous, not just because of the terrain, but because of who awaited them at the top. Salus, the once proud leader of the Light faction, had withdrawn from the world after the devastating war. His light, though brilliant, had grown distant, a beacon that no longer welcomed but warned. Terra glanced at her companions. Yumiko's face was set in determination, the faint flicker of fire in her eyes contrasting with the steady flow of water at her fingertips. Kailani, the voice of calm reason, adjusted her staff and nodded. "We have to try," Terra said, gripping her hammer tightly. "And if he won't listen?" Yumiko asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "Then we make him," Kailani replied simply. The three began their ascent, the trials of the ascent. The first challenge came as the wind picked up, carrying with it shards of light that sliced through the air like blades. It was Salus's warning, a test of their resolve. Kailani took the lead, raising her staff to summon a barrier of water. The light struck it, refracting into harmless beams. "He's testing us," she said calmly. "Let's show him we're serious," Yumiko said, summoning her fire to meld with Kailani's water, creating a swirling steam that deflected the relentless assault. Terra pressed forward, her strength breaking through the crumbling rocks underfoot. She turned to her companions. "We move together. Don't let up." The winds relented as they neared the summit, but the light grew brighter, almost blinding. The summit. At the peak, Salus stood waiting, his figure bathed in radiant light. His armor gleamed like the sun, and his wings of pure energy stretched wide behind him. Beside him stood Aaron, his second in command, gripping a scythe that shimmered with the power of the wind. "You dare to disturb my sanctuary." Salus's voice boomed, echoing across the peaks. "Sanctuary?" Terra shouted back. "The world is falling apart, and you've hidden yourself away. We need your help." "Salus." "You speak of need," Salus replied, his tone cold. "Yet it was need that led to the destruction of balance. You asked me to take up arms again, to spill more blood. I refuse." Yumiko stepped forward, fire and water swirling around her. "We don't want more bloodshed. We want to end this once and for all. The world doesn't need gods. It needs leaders willing to fight for peace." Salus's gaze softened slightly, but Aaron raised his scythe, stepping forward. "They come with pretty words, but words won't undo the damage. Why should we trust them?" Terra slammed her hammer into the ground, the shockwave rippling through the summit. "Because we're still standing. After everything, we're still here. If we can keep fighting, so can you." Kailani approached slowly, her voice gentle but firm. "The factions are coming together. We've seen it with our own eyes. Darkness and light, fire and water, earth and air, they're learning to coexist. But they need their leaders to show them the way. The choice?" Salus turned away, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you truly believe the factions can unite after all that's been lost?" "We have to," Terra said. "If we don't, then everything we've fought for will have been for nothing." For a moment, there was silence. The wind calmed and the blinding light dimmed. Saelis lowered his head, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. Finally, he turned to Aaron. "Prepare the forces. We will join them." Aaron hesitated but nodded, his sighs dissolving into a gust of wind. Saelis approached the three leaders, his light no longer blinding but warm. "If we are to end this war, then we must do it together. But know this, there will be sacrifices. Are you prepared for that?" Tara stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We wouldn't be here if we weren't." Yumiko grinned, the fire in her eyes blazing brighter. "Let's show them what we're made of." Kailani placed a hand on Saelis' shoulder. "Together, we can restore the balance." Saelis nodded, his wings folding behind him. "Then let us descend. The world awaits." As the four leaders began their journey down the mountain, a sense of hope ignited among them. The world stood on the brink of chaos, but united, they carried the light needed to guide it back from the darkness. Epilogue: A world reborn. The land lay in silence. The battle was over. The factions had dispersed, and the echoes of war faded into the wind. From the ruins of the battlefield, the survivors rose, bearing the weight of loss and the promise of a new era. The aftermath: the leaders of the factions gathered on neutral ground, a barren plain now dotted with the scars of their conflict. Tara, Saelis, Erebus, and Kailani stood together, each bearing marks of their own battles and choices. Erebus, still haunted by the lingering presence of Nixaroth, vowed to use his dark powers only to protect the fragile peace. Though he remained an outsider to many, his efforts during the final battle earned him a place among the other leaders. His shadowy figure served as a reminder of the fine line between destruction and salvation. Tara's faction began the slow process of healing the land. With Vulcana and Regina by her side, she turned the barren fields into fertile ground, planting the first seeds of hope for future generations. Saelis returned to his people, guiding them with wisdom and strength. Aaron, his loyal second-in-command, remained at his side, ensuring that the Light faction upheld its promise of unity and justice. Cyrus's journey. Cyrus was gone. No one knew where he had gone after the battle. Stripped of his power and abandoned by his closest allies, he vanished into the wilderness. Logi and Regina, though still loyal in spirit, chose to serve Tara, finding solace in the Earth faction's mission of renewal. The balance restored, the factions formed a council to ensure that no single power could dominate the others. Each leader contributed their wisdom and abilities to the cause. Tara represented the nurturing force of the Earth. Kailani and Kaido ensured that the waters would flow freely for all. Saelis safeguarded the light of hope. Erebus, the reluctant guardian, wielded the darkness to shield the fragile balance. Yumiko's redemption. Yumiko, once corrupted by the Führerkrieger's blood, struggled with his inner demons. With the help of Kailani and Erebus, he learned to balance fire and water, becoming a symbol of harmony. His journey of redemption inspired others to seek their own paths toward peace. A world reborn. The years passed, and the scars of war began to heal. The world saw its first era of true collaboration as the factions worked together to rebuild. Villages grew into cities, and barren lands turned into thriving forests and rivers. Legends of the Great War and the heroes who fought it spread across the land. Songs were sung of Tara's unyielding strength, Saelis' wisdom, Erebus' redemption, and even Cyrus's fiery ambition. The names of the fallen were etched into monuments, ensuring they would never be forgotten. But the peace was fragile, as peace always is. The leaders knew the balance they had achieved could shift at any moment. And so, they remained vigilant, not as rivals, but as protectors of a world that had suffered too much. In the heart of the new capital city, a great tree grew, its roots reaching deep into the earth and its branches stretching toward the heavens. Around it, the people of every faction gathered to celebrate their unity. Beneath its shade, the factions swore to protect the balance they had fought so hard to achieve, no matter the cost. And far away, in the endless desert, a lone figure stood on a cliff, watching the sun set on the world he once sought to rule. Cyrus's flame still burned, but what it would ignite next was a question only time could answer. In the scorched deserts beyond the battlefields, a lone figure moved through the ash-streaked skies. Whether Cyrus sought redemption, revenge, or something else entirely remained a mystery. For now, the world was at peace, but the balance, like the sun, would always rise and fall. Epilogue. The shifting sands of fate. The sun blazed mercilessly over the endless desert. Each grain of sand shimmered like molten gold under the oppressive heat. Cyrus stumbled forward, his once majestic armor battered and scorched, his crimson cloak reduced to little more than a tattered banner of his defeat. His steps were slow, each one sinking into the yielding sands that dragged at his feet, as if the earth itself sought to claim him. The weight of his failure pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had been defeated, betrayed, even by the same allies he once sought to dominate. His kingdom lay in ruins, his followers scattered. Yet his burning hatred and will to survive carried him forward. The wind shifted, a low and haunting howl, and with it came a voice that slithered into his mind. "You do not walk alone, Cyrus." He froze, his breath catching as the shadow of something ancient and malevolent stretched across the sands. Before him, a towering spire of blackened rock erupted from the dunes, shrouded in a swirling mist of darkness. At its base stood a figure, or rather, the suggestion of one. A swirling mass of shadows and glowing red eyes, its form shifting like smoke. The god of darkness and demons, Nyxaroth, spoke again. "You seek power, Cyrus. Power to reclaim what was stolen, to crush those who wronged you." Cyrus' eyes narrowed. "I don't need your pity, God," he spat, though his voice lacked its usual venom. "I've lost everything. What more could you take from me?" Nyxaroth chuckled, the sound echoing like the groan of ancient would understrain. "I offer not pity, mortal, but a chance to rise anew. I offer vengeance, a kingdom forged in shadow and dominion over life and death itself." Cyrus hesitated, his pride warred with the reality of his circumstances. He was broken, his strength spent. But within his chest, his ambition flickered like an ember, stubborn and unyielding. "What's the price?" he asked warily. Nyxaroth's shadow surged forward, tendrils of darkness coiling around Cyrus like chains. "Your will, your body, together, we shall become a force unstoppable. They will tremble before our name, not as Cyrus or Nyxaroth, but as one." Cyrus gritted his teeth. The promise of power was intoxicating, but he knew this was no simple pact. It was a merging, a surrender of his identity. Yet as the faces of his enemies flashed before his eyes, Terra, Kailani, Yumiko, and even Salus, his resolve hardened. "Do it," he growled. The darkness surged, flooding into him. Cyrus' body convulsed as the shadows enveloped him, his veins burning with cold fire. His armor blackened and reformed, twisting into jagged shapes that pulsed with crimson light. His sword shattered, only to reforge itself into a nightmarish weapon of jagged obsidian. As the transformation completed, Cyrus opened his eyes. They glowed an unearthly red, filled with a chaotic fusion of his ambition and Nyxaroth's malice. "Rise, my vessel," Nyxaroth whispered within his mind, their voices now intertwined. Cyrus, no, the being they had become, looked out across the desert with a cruel smile. In the distance, storm clouds of darkness gathered, and with them came the sound of war drums. The world will remember the name we carve into its bones. The camera of fate zoomed out, leaving the newly forged Demon King standing at the heart of the storm, a harbinger of chaos to come. And somewhere in the distance, the winds carried whispers of dread as a new war loomed. To be continued. Epilogue. The Shard of Balder. The ruins of an ancient battlefield stretched across the icy tundra, frost-covered remnants of a long-forgotten war peeking through the snow. Salus, the eternal strategist, tread cautiously over the shattered remains of colossal swords and broken shields, his sharp gaze scanning the desolate horizon. The wind howled through the frozen expanse, carrying an air of forlorn sorrow. The sky above him was an endless gray, punctuated only by the faint shimmer of auroras that danced weakly in the distance. This was no ordinary wasteland. It was a place steeped in history, one of the few locations left untouched since the ancient gods clashed in a battle that shaped the world. Saelis adjusted his cloak, pulling it tighter against the biting cold. He had come to this forsaken land on whispers alone. Rumors of a remnant of Baldur's heart, a fragment of unimaginable power, lost to the ages. The god Baldur, a figure of light and life, had fallen eons ago, his divine essence shattered and scattered like stars across the heavens. Each shard was said to contain a piece of his incorruptible soul, capable of reshaping the very fabric of existence. But for Saelis, it was more than a relic. It was a tool, a weapon to tilt the scales of the looming battle that would decide the world's fate. As he stepped deeper into the ruins, the ground beneath him began to pulse faintly, a rhythmic thrum that echoed through his bones. He stopped, his breath visible in the icy air, and knelt to touch the frost-covered earth. A faint glow emanated from beneath the snow. With measured precision, he brushed aside the frost and debris, revealing a crystalline shard no larger than his palm. The shard pulsed with a soft, golden light, its radiance warm even against the freezing cold. Saelis stared at it, his usually impassive face betraying a flicker of awe. "It's true," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The heart of Baldur still lives." He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the shard. The moment he touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him, and visions exploded in his mind. He saw flashes of a world bathed in light, a harmonious realm untouched by darkness. But the vision shifted, turning into scenes of war, betrayal, and despair. Baldur's fall, the splintering of his essence, and the chaos that followed. Saelis staggered back, gasping for air. The shard's light dimmed, as if it had shared only a fragment of its story. "Power like this, it could save us," he said, steadying himself, "or destroy us all." Behind him, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest whisper, a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind itself. "Choose wisely, strategist. Light and shadow are but sides of the same coin." Saelis turned, his sharp eyes scanning the tundra, but he saw nothing. Yet he felt it, a presence ancient and watchful, as if the shard itself weighed his worth. Clutching the shard, he stood tall, his mind already working through the possibilities. If wielded correctly, this fragment could tip the balance, perhaps even against Nyxaroth and his growing threat. But the power of the gods was never without consequence. As Saelis began his journey back to his forces, the shard's glow illuminated his path through the storm, a beacon of hope, or a harbinger of something far more dangerous. The stage was set, and Saelis knew this discovery would change everything.